Hi again, this is Mike from Sundance. Today we're going to be talking about troubleshooting your control circuits. So there's a few basic components that we're going to talk about. They're going to vary slightly depending on whether you have a single channel box, a double channel box, or a 4-channel box. But the troubleshooting is really all going to be the same, and the way it works is all the same. So basically you've got your power supply in here, which converts your 110 house voltage down to a 12 volt DC. You've got your control circuit, which accepts the RF signal from your remote and from your rain sensor. And you've got your motor. Not a whole lot to it, not a super complicated system. This is a 4-channel box. Like I said, the troubleshooting is going to be the same for pretty much all of the different boxes. So if you're having an issue where your motor isn't operating, there's a few steps that I'll take. So the first thing that I'll check is I'll listen for a click in the box. So if I operate this remote, I can see the motor's operating in this case, but you can hear a click in the box. That's a relay that's switching over whenever you push that button. You can also look to see if the light turns on. In that case, that tells you that the remote is communicating with the control board. Now, if that's not working and you're not getting any motion from your motor, then I start to get into a little bit different troubleshooting steps. One thing I recommend having on hand is a multimeter such as this one. You can get them fairly cheap. You're also going to want to have a small flathead screwdriver in case we need to swap out a motor or a power supply or something like that. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to check the voltage on my power supply. So I can do that just by putting these leads on the terminal. And I can see here that my voltage is 12 volts. So I know that the power supply is providing the right voltage. So I know that's good. The next thing I can do is I can try to switch the motor on. And the motor's operating, so I know it's working in this case. But I would check on the terminal here and see if I'm getting 12 volts there. If I were to be getting 12 volts here like I am, and the motor's not working, then what that means is that you probably have either a bad motor or you have a loose connection somewhere along your wiring. So in this case we just have a continuous strand of wire, but the next thing I would check is if you're getting the 12 volts here at the board from the power supply and to the motor at these wires, then what I would do is I would go along the length of your wire and see if there's any loose connections. If you've had to splice this because you needed to go 20, 30 feet or whatever, check and make sure those connections are good. In some cases, some kind of connections that you might have, you might even be able to take your multimeter and check the voltage at those connections to make sure that it is getting the power all the way there. Now, if you've checked your power supply, that's giving you good power to your board. You've heard the click whenever you operate the remote, and you've checked that this voltage is 12 volts, and you've checked your connections and they're all good, then that means that you likely have a bad motor, and you can contact your local distributor about getting that warranted replacement. If you're getting the voltage here and you're not hearing the click, then the next thing you would want to do is verify the programming on the remote. The other thing you can do is operate it locally here. So if I push the up or down button, in this case I push the down, I would then check the voltage here. This voltage will stay applied for about 30 seconds after you push the button. I can check it, yep, that's applying the 12 volts again, which obviously we can tell because this motor's operating. But if you can operate it locally from this board, but it's not working from the remote, then it's likely a programming issue. We have had a very, very rare cases where the remote itself went bad. Typically it's just the programming issue though. One thing you should see in the box when you first get it is a set of instruction sheets. Looks like this. And this is also available online. Or you could get it from your local distributor. But that'll give you details on how to delete all the programming for the remote, which is what I would typically recommend in this case, is to delete all the programming. That'll get you set back to square zero. And then we have another video in this series that talks about how to program this box from scratch. So to kind of summarize, the way I do this troubleshooting is I start at the power supply, check that voltage. If that voltage is good, then I move to see if it might be an issue with the board. I do that by checking the voltage on the terminals when I operate with the remote or operate locally. If I can operate it locally, but not with the remote, then that means that it's probably a remote issue and requires reprogramming or potentially a replacement of the remote. If I can't operate it from either the remote or locally, that means that this board has likely gone bad. You can get that warrantied and replaced by your local distributor. If you're getting the voltage applied to the terminals for the motor, as you would expect, then I would check your wiring connection, make sure that there's no loose connections or anything like that. If you've checked your connections and everything looks good and you're still not seeing any movement, then you've likely got a bad motor. And that will also be covered under warranty for the 5 years. If you have any questions, feel free to contact your local distributor if you're having any other challenges or you're not seeing any results from your troubleshooting efforts.